Welcome back to Hudson Appliance for another episode of Wicked Good Food. I'm your host, Matt Williams, and today it's all about one of my favorite things in the world, and that's butter. Those of you that watch the show have seen me use butter quite a lot. It's like the best fat that's going out there, except for duck fat, but that's a whole nother story. But today we're going to focus on butter, and we're actually going to make some butter. Very quick and easy to make butter, and it can actually be a little more economical, and it's fun because you can play around and do some different things with it. We're going to talk about different types of butters. We're going to make a clarified butter, which we'll get into a little bit what that is. We're going to make a compound butter with some lemon and some dill and put that over some pan-seared scallops. And we're also going to use some of those same pan-seared scallops, and we're going to make a beurre blanc sauce, which is a French white wine and butter sauce. It's fantastic. But it's all about butter. What I wanted to show you here was this. So here I have heavy cream, and this is what we're going to make our butter out of. So it's about 40% milk fat, butter fat, and what we're going to do is we're going to beat it up. You'll see we're going to make whipped cream. It's going to grow in volume, but then all of a sudden those tiny, tiny little bits of fat that are in there are going to start to stick to each other. The more and more they stick to each other, the more they're going to get rid of the liquid that's in there. And it's going to eventually be this solid mass of butter in what's going to look like just a little bit cloudy water, and that's actually buttermilk. Most of the butter we have is sweet cream butter, which is made with just regular fresh cream. What I have here is this is some cultured cream. This literally is the exact same cream from the same bottle even. And this is 2 cups of cream that yesterday I added 2 tablespoons of yogurt, this yogurt right here, of just some organic plain yogurt. And the cultures that are in that yogurt actually have gone, and check this out. See how much thicker this is? This is how you'd make creme fraiche. This is on its way to being sour cream. But what that does is it gives our butter a little bit more character. If you look around at the supermarket, you're starting to see more and more of these really nice butters. They're quite expensive, and this is a place where it's worth your while to make your own. We're going to use our fresh cream for this today because the cultured butter, one of the benefits of it with the cultured cream actually is that it doesn't break if you were to cook with it. But it also takes quite a long time to make butter out of. So we're going to use this cream here. But before we do that, I want to start another project, which is going to be our clarified butter. And this is just going to be a slow process of taking butter. And I've got a pound of butter here. I'm going to slide it in this pot, and it's over medium heat or so. We're going to let that cook. So now I'm going to grab our mixer, put it up here. I'm going to use my whip, so I'll set up the whip. Get my bowl on there. And I'm going to go ahead and add all our cream. There's nothing else in here. Whoops, where are we going? Now, I'm going to let this run, and we're going to do a little time-lapse video so you can see exactly how this comes from cream into whipped cream into butter. All right, so welcome back. Isn't that kind of cool? So this went through that whole process of becoming whipped cream, and then that butter started smashing into each other, all that fat, and we end up with this butter and then this liquid. So there's a student from Hudson High, Lacey, that's actually here helping out today, and she just came over and looked, and she's like, I was not expecting that, which is cool. It's interesting to see how that works. So we're going to get back to this in just a minute, but what I did here was I just melted that pound of butter, and I want to show you something. I'm going to pour it into this jar because we can see through it. And then I'm just going to let this sit. And see how cloudy it is right now? We're going to let that sit, and we're going to let it separate into its layers before we go ahead and make our clarified butter. So I'm just going to stick this off to the side. Now, here we've got our butter, and it's all stuck to this whisk. So I'm going to stick it up here, just using my hands, my clean hands. Force it in here. We're going to let any of this liquid drain away. So this liquid that's left is buttermilk. That's what buttermilk is. It's the liquid that's left over from making butter. Now, buttermilk that you get at the store usually is skim milk that they add some cultures to, so it's not true buttermilk. But remember that cultured cream we started with in the beginning? That's how you'd make buttermilk, is by making butter with that. And then we have all this liquid here, which I'm just going to pour right on the side here. Let it run through our strainer. And actually, you know what? I can start to remove the big hunks. But we want to get all the butter we can out of there. So we'll let that drain for a moment. And what I have here next to me, kind of grab this, whoops. So let that drain out and any other butter that comes up, but you can see all that buttermilk coming right in the bottom. So this is just a bowl of ice cold water, literally ice cold water. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of take the butter and I'm going to knead it a little bit in the water. See how dark, how cloudy the water got so quickly? Move that a little more. And what we're going to do is you can do this a bunch of times. You can do it 3 or 4 times, but each time you change your water and you want to knead the butter a little bit, it's important you have cold water because the heat from your hands will actually melt the butter. But each time you would change your water, the butter actually rinses out a little bit more of the buttermilk. And so I'm going to squeeze out as much as I can. And you can squeeze this in the rag as well. Cheesecloth is the best thing for this, but a nice clean kitchen rag will work just fine. And now let me wipe my hands real quick. And I'm going to pour off this liquid. This will just go down the drain now. If you're going to use some water to make some bread or something like that, I would use that buttermilk first. That'll be awesome. But just use this water too. That's fine. And then the last thing we're going to do to finish our butter is, and this is my favorite, in particular with that cultured butter, is some really, really coarse salt. And I'm going to add about a teaspoon to it. And you can use your hands if you want. We can use our spatula here, and we just want to mix it together. Just to incorporate it. See, what I like about this is the butter is salted because we just added salt to it. But it's not real salty, except you get a crunch of these coarse sea salt crystals. All right. Beautiful. And our butter is done. I'm going to wrap that in some plastic wrap. Now the other thing I wanted to show you is check this out. So this is that butter we were in the process of clarifying. See how you can see 3 pretty distinct layers? At the top, there's a very thin layer that has all these milk solids in it. If it happens to be salted butter, which this is not, that's where a lot of the salt will be trapped. Down in the bottom, there's this milky liquid. So you can see that not all of the butter is actually fat. There are some other things in there. This is about 80% or so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to return this back to the pan, And I'm going to let it simmer a little longer until we can get this crystal clear. So we'll take a quick break. I'm going to let that finish. I'm going to get this wrapped up and we'll move on to our next project. All right, so we put our butter back in here. We let it simmer a little more. One of the things, a different way you can make the clarified butter is you can actually let it cook a little longer. And what happens is the water boils and it eventually evaporates. We're not going to let it go that far. This is cooked a little more. There's a big layer of the solids on top. So I'm going to shut this heat off. Oops. And same thing, I'm going to dump it into the same jar. And we can check out the layers now as it separates. Now, ideally we wouldn't dump it all together like this because it's going to get a little bit cloudier, but I want to do it so you can see. But if you were going to do this at home, shut it off and let it sit, and you'll see all the solids that end up rising to the top. Then you'll scoop those off. We'll get that out of the way. So while that separates into its layers, we're going to work on our compound butter. So first thing we're going to do now, this is going to be a lemon dill butter. Compound butter is just butter that's mixed with stuff. We've made a couple other compound butters in our show before. One of them we did was the maple butter with the pancake chicken, and I think we did a honey butter. And that was literally just maple syrup and butter or honey and butter. So this is going to have some lemon and dill. Now, remember that butter is a fat, and if you try to mix something that's not fat with it, they want to be separate, just like Italian salad dressing. So instead of adding lemon juice to this, we're going to use a little of the lemon zest. So I'm going to use this microplane, which I love because it gives us very fine pieces of just that outside bit. Whenever you're using any sort of citrus like this, make sure you wash it. All right, they spray these citrus with all sorts of interesting things, we'll say. So make sure you wash them real well. And that's probably good. And then we're going to add some dill. So I have some fresh dill here. I'm just going to take a little bit off the top, like the barber. Give it a quick chop. If you find a little bit of stem in there, you can get it out. It's not going to hurt you if you leave it in there. So we'll put our dill in. And we're going to start with that much. I don't know if that's going to be the perfect amount or not. But then what I have here is butter. So this butter is at room temperature. You can see how soft it is. It's actually sitting here under the hot lights, so this is perfect. Now, if you're doing a lot of it, or your butter's not quite at room temperature, a way you can make the process happen a little faster is to throw it in your mixer. Same mixer we were just using earlier. I'm just going to use a whisk and just beat this up a little bit. Knock it back out. Just until it's well incorporated. Now, if you're using unsalted butter, you can go ahead and add a little bit of salt to it if you want, but we're going to leave it just like this. So I'm going to let this sit for a minute, but I have to go grab my parchment paper. What I would do is roll this up in some parchment paper and throw it in the refrigerator. That way you can slice it off. You can put it in a piping bag and pipe it out and make little rosettes with it. Throw those in the freezer and just pull them out whenever you need them. But this is perfect for now. I'll just stick it out of the way here. Then we're going to take our lemon here, and I'm going to get rid of the dill on here, even though it's not that big of a deal. Cut it in half, and I'm going to squeeze the lemon just to juice it, and the other half, because we're going to use this lemon to make our lemon beurre blanc. Perfect. So to make our beurre blanc, which is white butter, it's a white butter sauce. Dump our lemon juice in there. That pan's warm, obviously, as it did that. We're going to add some white wine. Then to that also, get this stuff out of the way. To give it a little more flavor, I'm going to add some shallot. So I'm going to dice the shallot really fine. I already had it cut in half. I already had it peeled, so we'll dice this up. And that can go right in there. Just Just get a little more flavor. And so what we're going to do is we're going to let this simmer, we'll let this reduce a little bit. So before this melts anymore, I'm going to scrape this out of here, put it in some parchment, get it in the refrigerator. We'll check this out, we'll let this sit a little more, and then we're actually going to skim the solids off there. But we'll get back in a minute, we'll finish our beurre blanc, and we'll start to sear our scallops. All right, so our liquid there is starting to reduce a little bit. Our butter has had a chance to sit here a little. Some of the solids are caught on the side of the jar, but you get the idea of this big layer of solids, and see how much less there is of the liquid in the bottom? It's because that evaporated. What I'm going to do is scoop this off gently. So you might ask, why? Why are we doing this? And there are a few reasons. I used to ask why. Why do we do this? There are a few reasons why we would do this. One of the most important is that by removing this in particular, you raise the smoke point of the butter. And that means you raise the temperature at which it'll burn. Now, because this is an odd-shaped jar, we're not going to be able to get it all off, but that's all right. This stuff, these milk solids, that is the stuff that burns. That's what makes butter burn at such a low temperature. So by removing, there's still some in there, but most of that, we're going to raise the temperature a little bit. I have here our scallops. I'm going to move that out of the way. I'm going to season these with some salt and pepper, some kosher salt. No more of that big coarse salt for this. Just toss these around a bit to coat them. And so speaking about our smoke point, I have our pan here. I'm going to turn this up a bit. Oops. And what we're going to do actually is we're going to add some oil to the pan, because this has a higher smoke point. But we're also going to get some flavor from our butter by adding some of this butter. But I'm going to try to be careful to not get any of the solids. That's going to help us to not brown our butter. Sometimes you want brown butter. Brown butter is one of my favorite things actually, as a sauce. We'll let that warm up just a little bit more. One of the really important things, other important things, or reasons why you would clarify your butter is because you get rid of this liquid on the bottom. And we're going to do a quick little experiment. In a minute, I'm going to make some popcorn. And we're going to see the difference between just melted butter on popcorn and this clarified butter, and the big difference it makes in how soggy the popcorn gets. All right, so this is pretty hot. If this were just plain butter, just straight butter, this would have burnt already. But we want that butter flavor. So I'm just going to spread out these scallops. Now some places serve clarified butter with lobster, with stuff like that, which I don't like. I like this stuff. This is where all the salt ends up. This is where I think there's so much flavor from the butter. So if I'm going to have a piece of lobster, I like to dip it in the melted butter and have that stuff stick to it. Some people will serve that. And I guess to each his own. But if I'm having lobster, I'm just melting butter and having as much butter as I can with that lobster. All right, so we're going to let these sear. All the way over here, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a little bit of our clarified butter. And I'm going to use some oil. Just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. Then I'm going to add popcorn. And that should be plenty. So if you've never cooked popcorn like this in a pan, be careful. It's going to make way more than you think. So we're going to take a couple minutes. We're going to let these sear. We'll let our popcorn pop. This will reduce. We'll come back and put everything together. So our scallops are all seared off. I have them off to the side, keeping warm. This, I have to tell you, this induction burner, I've never cooked popcorn before on it. I've never in my life cooked popcorn as fast, and it didn't burn. That was awesome. I might have to get one of these for home. But anyway, so I just cooked popcorn. I put it in 2 separate bowls here. What I'm going to do is I took some of our clarified butter here, and I'm going to take, and I'm going to just pour it over the top of our popcorn. About like so. And I'm just going to give it a quick toss. And what I want you to do is just take a look at that and look at the popcorn and see how it hasn't shrunken at all, how it didn't get all wilty or anything. Now I'm going to take this other butter, which is our clarified butter, but I'm going to mix it together to get all that liquid that was in the milk. I'm going to move that right there. And so this is like your melted butter that we put on popcorn. And here you can actually see the popcorn move and get wilty. Like, look at this little piece here, how it's wilted up. So that's a part, and you can see it's still moving as it's kind of shrinking up. As what it's doing is it's actually absorbing the water from the butter. So that's why I'm a big fan of clarified butter on my popcorn. Now, remember, whether you use salted butter or not, when you take off that stuff off the top, you're going to take off some of the salt. So I always make sure I have some salt available. So that's kind of a cool little experiment. Now, one of the last things we have to do before we get Arthur up here is to finish our beurre blanc. So for our beurre blanc, we have our reduction here that's reduced. I'm going to strain it out. You don't have to strain it out, but traditionally it's strained out. Just like that. Now, one of the things I want you to notice, this is one of my favorite things in the world about butter, and it's monter à beurre, which is a French word for mount with butter. You can take almost anything and add butter to it and make it better. So when I went to culinary school, you know, I wasn't the only one learning how to cook. My classmates were learning how to cook too, and we had to eat lunch every day. And we'd eat in the restaurant, and we'd eat whatever the other students made. We'd always get soup, and the soups, for whatever reason, just weren't that good. But what we would do was always take the cold butter, get our soup, and mix it right into the soup. And it's cool. It makes it a little thicker, makes it a little richer. I love to do that with tomato sauce too. Another fantastic thing to do. What I'm going to do here is this is warm. We don't want it boiling. I'm going to take butter and add it to this. If you look right now, see how thin this is? There's a big hunk of peppercorn in there that snuck through. What I'm going to do is add our butter, room temperature butter, right to this, and just whisk it in. You have to whisk immediately. And continue to whisk until it's all melted in. I'll move that off a little bit. And see how it's changing color? It's actually getting a little thicker. So we just mounted this with butter. And this is what a beurre blanc is. There are lots of different ways you can season this, lots of different things you can do, but this is just simple lemon, white wine. Now, as we've talked about before in other shows, this is an emulsion. And this will hold together a little bit, but it won't hold together very long. This is one of those things you do the very last minute. So since it is the last minute, that's done. I'm going to season this with a little salt. We'll get Arthur up here, we'll pour it over our scallops, and we'll see what we think. Hey, Arthur.
Hey, Matt, how are you? Welcome back.
Thanks again for having me. I'm doing well. So today, butter.
Butter.
All about butter.
All about butter.
We know how you and I feel about butter, so I thought this would be a good one. We did a few different things. We actually made some butter. So this is the butter we made earlier. I took it, wrapped it in some plastic wrap, and this little basket is a basket I had actually from some other butter. But we're going to taste some of that. But this is butter we made right here today, and it has some real coarse sea salt crystals in it.
Okay.
We made a clarified butter. So this is a store-bought butter that we went through the process of clarifying, separating into its different layers. We've got 2 different popcorns here. One of them has it after it's been clarified, which is this one, and this one is before. And you can see what happens to the butter. It makes the popcorn shrink because of the water in there.
Okay.
Then I have 2 pans of seared scallops here. One of them we're going to put a little beurre blanc sauce on, and I'll do that right now. And this beurre blanc is a very simple white wine butter sauce. Should pour a little bit, just like that. And that was as thin as water before we added the butter, and you can see how it kind of thickened up a little bit. We can garnish it with a little bit of how you do a dill on there. And then here we're going to use some of this. So what I did was I wrapped up our butter, and this is a lemon dill compound butter. And I threw it in the freezer. It didn't get solid, but it's firm enough that we can take and cut a little slice off. And this is one of my favorite things to do with butter.
Dill in there, right?
There is. You're allergic to dill?
Nope.
Okay, good. We can put a couple of them on there. Now these scallops have been out for a couple minutes, but usually this will melt right away, and this will create our sauce that they're going to kind of swim in. So we can kind of leave that be. But I have a quiz for you.
Okay.
What do you think the ingredients are in butter?
I was big as some sort of milk.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can stop right there.
Okay.
That's it. So I have a package of butter here. The ingredients, cream. That's it. Now, can you guess what's in margarine?
Got to be all water.
So check it out. So margarine starts with liquid soybean oil, partially hydrogenated soybean oil, water, salt, whey, vegetable monodiglycerides, soy lecithin, potassium sorbate, citric acid, beta-carotene, vitamin A, palmitate.
No.
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons why I don't use that stuff. You know, this is just cream in the butter, and it's good stuff. I can tell you're ready to start tasting stuff.
Oh,
Let's cut a little bit of this here. So this fresh butter, this will last a couple weeks in the refrigerator. What I do actually is I keep my butter in the freezer.
Okay.
I'll have one stick out for me to use, but the rest stays in the freezer. Butter's actually like a sponge, and it'll absorb flavors from other things around it. So I'll cut a little bit off, and you can just try a little bit with a spoon or on your finger if you want. So you get a little crunch. That's a little crunch of salt.
Yeah, I can taste the salt on it. Very, very creamy.
Yeah, but it tastes like fresh cream.
Yeah. Very good.
So you want to try a little bit of the popcorn and just see the difference? So this is kind of wilty. They both have about the same amount of butter, both have the same amount of salt on them. But this really retains its texture very well.
This is real chewy.
Yeah, exactly.
It becomes real chewy. This here is nice. This tastes like it's old popcorn. Okay, and this tastes much more fresh.
Perfect, and literally the same batch, just by having that clarified butter.
Very good.
Which scallop do you want to try first?
Oh, we got to try the lemon there.
All right, so this is a lemon beurre blanc.
This is butter sauce too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
A little bit of lemon. We can get that white wine that's kind of reduced, not too strong, and the richness from the butter.
that's to die for. It really is. Oh,
It's very good.
very good.
Now this didn't melt as much as it should, but you can grab a little bit of the butter off the top as kind of your sauce there.
The lemon is better. But this here
Yep.
is wicked.
Wicked good.